desde su casa en Inglaterra. Hello, Jamie.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me.
No, thanks for joining. And lo que hemos hecho, Jamie, CEO de Celent, su español no es lo suficientemente bueno para poder dar la charla en persona, entonces él nos va a estar acompañando, inclusive para ir contestando preguntas. Obviamente las preguntas las va a contestar en inglés y lo que tenemos es su presentación con subtítulos para que todos podamos disfrutarla independientemente de si nos sentimos más cómodos con el inglés o con el español. Gabriela, no sé si puedas dar comienzo a la sesión de Jamie. Gracias.
Hi, my name is Jamie McGregor, and I'm the CEO of Celent. Thank you for joining me today. During this session, I'd like to cover the theme of executing at scale. We came up with this theme intentionally as we looked through the submissions of Model Insurer and also Model Bank and Model Wealth Manager, which have been running for over 14 years. And what I'd like to do in the next 20 minutes or so is just take you through that as a concept to hopefully give you some fresh views in this rather unusual time of a pandemic. I'd like to cover the notion of execution. I'd like to explore the role that fintechs and insurtechs have played across the industry in helping to change things. I'd like to discuss the role of incumbents and how maybe just right now this is a perfect time for them to take advantage and hopefully apply the lessons learned for their own business, and also talk a little bit about the path forward. I'd like to thank Dan Lattimore as well. So Dan has been behind this research for Celent. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is his research. And he's the Chief Research Officer, so more from the banking side than the insurance side, like myself. So thanks to Dan for pulling this together. So without a doubt, we face an uncertain future today. And who would have thought way back just 2 to 3 months ago, we would be where we are as a world right now? Many of you would have been tracking the headlines, both from the economic side, like this one from the IMF, and also within the insurance space. So the number of new dividend calls, raising capital, concerns over profits, it's hard not to see it in everyday life. And it's going to change us without any doubt. But given that, so I think an uncertain outlook does demand an increased focus on execution. So hopefully what we go through today will be helpful. So let's start with the notion of execution itself. Now, many of you, I'm sure, would have read this book. So from Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. So the idea of execution certainly isn't new. This book is dated 2002. There will be ones before then, and there will continue to be new books being written about it regularly. But certainly, it's certainly not a new concept. Being big as well is no excuse, right? So Who Says Elephants Can't Dance by Lou Gerstner, the former IBM exec, was again another very, very successful book, also published in 2002, making the point that you can pull together a variety of different small incremental innovations and make a big difference on a large scale. And when we look and speak to our clients who have helped us in our research, and also helped to inform us of our views and our opinions, sort of unpicking what good execution looks like is sometimes quite difficult. Sometimes you can see it after the event, but really knowing the recipe is very difficult. And this came through from interviews with clients. So one interview, for example, with Dan Lattimore and a client of his, expressed a little bit of surprise initially, saying, well, you've shared so much in the case study with us about your ingredients for success. So I can't understand what your motivation is for wanting to be so open with us. And the answer came back that basically you can know the recipe, but the art is still in the cooking and making the cake. And ultimately, that's where the success comes. It's all about execution. So knowing the ingredients is not enough. So if we reflect on what's happened across the industry, new entrants have certainly pushed incumbents hard in the marketplace. And just looking at some headlines, for example, there are no shortages over the last 5 to 6 years of headlines announcing the death of traditional incumbents in the fintech arena. Largely banks and wealth managers focus quite often, and sometimes often even as recent as 2018, focusing on the disruptive robo-advisors. Some of them are genuine and certainly are showing new ways of working. Some of them still yet to be seen, still yet to show their value coming through. And in the insurance space, Lemonade is quite often a quoted piece about a totally new insurance company built upon digital from the outset, from trying to change the way that the whole industry is working. And likewise also Zhong'an. So this is a definite East versus West, new business models coming through and pushing the market hard, making the market rethink which way they're heading. But not all fintechs and insurtechs have been able to follow through on their original plans. So some of them, for example, like even sort of 9 months ago, Zhong'an's CEO stepped down because of a profits issue. Not necessarily what they were doing. It was just more about sort of where's the value coming out. In the banking world, Robinhood setting up a new savings and checkings account couldn't get the insurance it needed to transact. Now, you could argue that even the smallest bank in the US would know about some of the compliance issues of not getting this ready from the outset. And that sort of mistake would never have been allowed to run for as long as it was. But definitely sort of an interesting viewpoint. And then there's pivots, right? So not all fintechs or insurtechs sort of necessarily have sort of failed on the execution front. Some of it is being questionable whether in fact the market has been there and a pivot's required. So Move and Minds pivot towards business to business. And in the insurance space, we've seen quite a few of that too. So if you take, for example, the Trove piece, Scott Walczek quite openly has spoken in various podcasts with individuals about their decision to pivot away from certain markets, from being a brand, an insurance brand themselves, towards being more of a platform, a digital platform from which to help grow other people's businesses. And it's likely that as the pandemic sets in, we could see an increase in winnowing as investors look to try and accelerate the returns that they were expecting in this current uncertain outlook. So in the banking sector, SoftBank has been a huge investor in multiple different tech projects around the world. Cabbage being a lender in the US, that story continually evolves, right? It's a great example of technology, but when it comes through, the downturn in the credit cycle, it becomes very difficult to operate, when you actually need to create cash. Yes Bank as well, as another model bank example, was a model bank winner from just a few years ago for their API technology. So celebrated for a lot of their technology execution, but ultimately, unless you can sort of cover the loans that you're actually making, sort of that business also sort of has come to an end. And if we look in the insurance sector, there are multiple models now. If you look at different sort of emerging tech trends that have come through in the insurance sector, whether it's around peer-to-peer insurance, or whether it's around like this one, gadget insurance, or whether it's around sort of any other sort of IoT-related piece. Huge promises, great ideas, really successful implementations of the technology, but ultimately the customer's not willing to buy the products that are out there, then ultimately the business will have to close down and pack up. So it's not a case that necessarily all these things are failures. They're just good hypotheses that were tested, but unfortunately proved not to be true in the eyes of the customer. And that's something which all of us will face. And the reality is, as mentioned earlier, is the pandemic is focusing minds. It has to, as either some parts of the market fall away from a demand point of view, alternatively because basically the race of cash. It's definitely sharpening the focus and accelerating as we all change our behaviors in ways that were just simply unimaginable in February. Who would have thought that we'd be doing this virtually way back at the beginning of February and not doing it in person, for example? So let's hopefully give you some sort of framework to help you think through your options as you look out towards the future and you think about executing at scale and how it sort of plays into the world in which we operate, both from an innovation point of view from a fintech and short-tech point of view and from an incumbent point of view. Here's a 2x2 matrix. You should expect to see something like this from a firm like ours. This was, as I mentioned, was created from Dan. And what you can see here is that along the horizontal axis, you have scale potential. So from a modest scale through to an ambitious one. And then on the vertical axis, execution capability, which is the focus of this discussion. So between sort of mediocre towards excellent. And ideally, most of us will always want to be in the top right-hand corner where we have both scale and we're excellent executors and therefore can deliver on the value promise. But the reality is, it's sometimes hard to get there. What's the pathway to get there? So we take each corner in turn. You can see that, sort of in the bottom-hand corner, those who may not have the scale from the outset might be quite sort of green and fresh from an execution point of view. Here you see a lot of the startups, the initial startups, whether around fintech or whether around short tech. Radical innovations are quite hot in this sector, but generally getting the uptake with clients can be quite hard. It can be quite modest uptake. And as a result, some of these will disappear, they'll run out of money, but some of them will go on into other places. So it's just a question of, sort of what are the ingredients, the unpicking points to enable you to do that. If we move across towards really the incumbent zone, so incumbent launches, maybe some big tech coming into the sector, you can get a range of innovation levels between incremental and disruptive in this zone. But again, typically a modest uptake due to really middling or quite difficult execution. So how do you build scale on a very difficult concept? Scale as far as company size may not be enough in this particular section. And again, some of these will survive and go on into the top right-hand corner, and others may just fade away. If we go to the top left-hand corner now, so here you see this is the zone of the incumbent experiments. So where a lot of focus is being put on execution to get into a marketplace. There are some big techs and fintechs in this area as well as they scale and build a little bit more towards it. Again, you'll see a range of innovation levels with some modest uptake. And again, there'll be a situation where you can either scale and move into the right-hand corner, alternatively, it can fade away. And then finally, possibly this is the zone of the large incumbent. Building brand, building customer base is really hard. Few financial service companies enable them to do it at speed. But quite often in this zone, you don't see the radical innovation you see maybe in some of the other zones where there's more experimentation opportunity. Here you get sort of like almost trusted bets, a series of incremental innovations. But going back to what we said at the start, which is sometimes when they combine together can create a radically different proposition using fairly safe bets. So large products which collectively make a huge impact. Now, as you can see in this list, ideally you want to be able to sort of navigate towards the top right-hand corner as quickly as possible. But we know that can be quite hard. So to use an analogy that is sometimes often used in these environments is that big ships can withstand strong seas. And this is the incumbent advantage. Maybe it's an overused analogy, but certainly there. And the larger you are, so the more ability you have to withstand sort of rough seas and changes. It takes time to build momentum when you're a large ship. It takes time to set the correct course as well. So again, the analogy, difficult to steer sometimes, but once you get going, it can be formidable, especially in the rough seas. Agility can be good on top of this as well. So the smaller craft can be faster at accelerating, can be faster at turning. But sometimes, when the rough seas are just too big to take, they can catch up with the smaller craft. And arguably, you could say that's the situation which we may find ourselves in the midst of this economic crisis. At the end of the day, so when you actually look through it all, there are many advantages to being an incumbent, which sometimes fintechs and shorttechs don't have. So maybe this is the time that we see that inflection point switch and go back, yet to be seen. First of all, so what is it that incumbents have over the smaller fintech and shorttech rivals? The first thing, big ships have customers. And customers are unlikely to be going anywhere, at least in the short term, unless they're really badly mistreated. So the key thing is, to build that empathy and to build that excellent digital service. Second, they have brand. Brand is a really tough thing to build. If you're not a giant AFS or another brand from another area, it can take decades to build that brand up and that trust level. So getting the scale can be quite difficult unless you're willing to put a lot of money into supporting that brand development. Incumbents have assets. FIs are much better positioned than they would have been on the back of the last financial crisis, heading into this one. So they're far better capitalized and they're far better set up to be able to weather the storm, arguably. I much prefer to be a 1,000-man organization today than a 10-man startup heading into financial services. They have data. They have huge amounts of data. Sometimes too much to know really what to do with it and look for the patterns. But soon, if you believe, like I do, that the emerging tech space will deliver tools that are increasingly better, already better, in fact, many of the analytical tools, we'll be able to do much more with the data that we have. And it's a real treasure trove. There's no reason that any financial services can't use its own data and do what any insurtech or fintech does and augment it with external pieces if it has the will and it has the internal assets to be able to sort of leverage and use against it. Experience. Execs at incumbent firms who have seen a downturn in the past will have more experiences in their toolkit. They'll also have more tools around them to be able to use to be able to apply this. And one of those, of course, is regulatory competence. So, given the complications of what we're seeing and the speed of change, having experienced folks on the team is a godsend right now, who really know the regulation, really understand where the pitfalls are, and perhaps also know the regulators themselves to be able to work out which way they're likely to turn is a major advantage in the marketplace. So maybe things are changing. And incumbents, we know, use these advantages well. And when we look back through our own model insurer and model bank and model wealth management programs, you can see it in spades across the whole population. So this year, for example, we had 273 entries from 46 countries across each one of our 47 award winners. So insurance obviously makes up a big proportion of that. And you can get more information through the Summit site and visiting our own hub page, which has a lot of the details of each one of these. Drilling into the data behind that and actually sort of segmenting it, looking at what type of projects are being delivered, you can see that, according to our definition anyway, 88% of those model insurer winners this year executed at scale. So these are incumbent firms who are using technology in innovative ways to really scale up and prove value to their business. That's 12% are sort of either from outside industry or alternatively radical innovations that have yet to prove value. And if you take this year's winner, model insurer winner, so Cathay Life of Taiwan, they're a great example of this. So in acquiring customers at scale. So this is a customer experience, digital experience play. And what we've seen is basically an increase of 200,000 users with $1 billion revenue increase on the back of their excellent engagement platform. So it can be done. It can be done. And it's not just obviously in insurance and other places. You see it in banking as well. So Citizen Bank, winner of a Model Bank Award this year, has done something similar. So again, making clients feel like they're smarter with their own data, technology refresh, putting things into the cloud. Roll out to 8,000 people in one go. All those sort of things are great examples of executing at scale. And in the model wealth management piece as well, which is obviously aligned to some of the life spaces in insurance, Fidelity Investments in creating an ecosystem exchange to be able to basically plug in different apps and different ways, different services from other players, created a whole ecosystem with 175 different parties. Incumbents can do it when they put their mind to it. So, ask yourselves about the implications of executing at scale. And then also let's think about how that then applies to the different parts of the value chain. Because I think there's some good examples and some good takeaways here So what does it mean for financial institutions and insurers like yourselves? So the first one, really, if you look at the front office, the reality is that where we are, changes in customer behavior will accelerate further. They've already been going quite fast around digital experience, but they're going to get faster. So we long maintained that basically the key thing that any financial institution needs to do is to create that digital experience around empathy with their clients. So what does that mean in practice? Without a doubt, it will mean a reduction in in-person interactions whilst the pandemic goes on. We've already seen that. We've already seen firms prioritize certain services to be online over any other face-to-face piece. And the companies that will win will be the ones that can agilely develop those things very quickly if they don't have them today or already have them in place around sales and service. That inevitably drives more and more people as people get more educated around what's possible towards wanting a better digital experience. So not only does it increase your reach as a firm, but again, sort of the use of it will basically educate. So it's a case of educating customers too. Without a doubt, it'll also mean some new challenges to identity. We'll have to be smart in the way that we actually understand customers as they come through the digital channels, to check that what they're saying is true and accurate on each one of these things, as well as also continue to deliver an excellent service. And it does mean, across all our channels, that we need a better model to be able to deliver against it, which probably means, increasing different ways to engage around collecting money, around paying money out, around delivering the service that we're trying to do from an insurance point of view. And then also, fresh ways of doing things. So again, sort of the classic example of, say, an auto claim by an app. So self-reporting of claims, but obviously doing it in a way that can be protected, can protect your bottom line. And all those things inevitably lead to changes in the middle office. You can't do the front things without doing changes elsewhere across your organization. And as we've seen through the pandemic, sort of shift to work from home. Will it last? Yes or no? Sort of certainly the outlook for the moment is into 2021, where we have to continue working this way. But it does bring in some security pieces. It does make us think about our supply chain and the risks involved there. Increased use of video. Do we have the hardware at home? Do our people have the hardware? Many of you would have already gone through this and made these decisions already. But there are quite basic infrastructure pieces that also need to be looked at. The evolution when we go back to work of those environments. So will they be as densely packed as they were before? Probably not initially. But again, sort of how does it then evolve? How do you bring that experience through, that digital experience that where people may have had to speak to their advisors on Zoom or their claims adjusters on Microsoft Teams or anything of those sort of things? How do you continue with that level of engagement? And then sort of just thinking about what that actually means from an interactions point of view. So things like digital signatures for those who haven't started adopting those. So, the ability to sign contracts is amazing. And I must say that, being head of selling, I see a lot of contracts and have to sign contracts. How many of them clients still request a wet signature is still quite high. New data usages, without a doubt, whether it's around underwriting, understanding the customer, improving that streamlining process, plenty of opportunity there around machine learning, whether it's also around natural language generation and reading and image recognition. And of course, let's not forget, across all this, heading into next year, some firms will be under a lot of financial pressure as well. So a renewed focus on costs. And we can, I think today, deliver a brilliant, excellent digital service and also deliver on a cost reduction agenda at the same time. Might not have been true 5 to 10 years ago, but today I genuinely believe that's now a real possibility. And ultimately, those front office and middle office pieces flow back into the back office as well. So while there's no practical way for many office employees to work from home, so how might processes start to be restructured in the future? So again, thinking the re-engineering of the business. So will robotic process automation increase? I think it already is increasing quite fast, but it's likely to accelerate further. SaaS and cloud adoption, I think, has probably been the biggest boost to that. over the last few years, over the last few weeks that we've seen, and that's likely to continue into next year. And consultants, the people we choose to partner with us, how we work with them. So it's not just the internal firm view, it's how do we work with our supply chain partners, how do we work with our advisors, how do they come into our organization, how will that relationship change, and will the nature of that work change too? And cyber threats as well, without a doubt. As soon as you expose more of your business processes to an online world, you have to have a decent plan around security on your infrastructure. So, when you think about all these things, there's lots of changes on the horizon which have been catalyzed and focused by our current situation. And I think, if you reflect on, sort of between the, sort of the startup and the fintech, which have been great at sort of like spurring ideas, and the incumbent, sort of is a question about, sort of can we as an industry take on many of those attributes we need to and win in the environment that's coming up. So what now? So without a doubt, everything that I've discussed so far cannot be done without a solid technology agenda. And with each crisis, the technology agenda changes, and already we're seeing many of those seeds going into the future technology agenda. So it will change. What I would say is that not everything has to be as radical as sometimes we make it out to be. And we should take heart from knowing that not all projects need to be as headline worthy as maybe some of the model insurers and model bank winners. You don't have to be at that radical end of innovation. You just have to be really good examples of technology adoption. So here's a bit of advice as we head into the future world. First of all, summarizing all of this is, let's not try to be who we're not. We are incumbents. We have many of the attributes associated with that. But let's be aware of who we are and what we are, and try not to sort of be things that we're not. Second, leverage the strengths that we have, whether it's around brand, whether it's around customer, whether it's around data, whether it's around assets, whether it's around regulatory competence. All those things are phenomenally strong in an incumbent firm. Let's be humble. Let's recognize that we don't know all the answers, and we have to adapt and change as things go on. Empathy, both with our clients and our employees, is incredibly important right now. Acknowledge our weaknesses. So we know what we're good at, and we know what we're not. And by implication, so be willing to partner. Historically, the industry has always been a little slow to partner, but I think right now there's been no better time to revisit that as a firm and really ask, what does good look like when it comes to partnering with those, with our partners. It's a skill that can be practiced and can be improved. And if we get it right, it will yield dividends. So hopefully that's been useful and sort of an interesting view on potentially how things will develop as this pandemic goes. And executing at scale is a key theme, I think, that all of us need to be taking into the outcome as we come through the other side. So let's end on just a few personal observations. Number one, we're all in this together. Nobody really has, sort of the knowledge of what will happen next. Therefore, there's plenty of opportunity for us to learn from each other and recognize that we are where we are. Without customers, there is no business. So the most important thing we need to think about is retaining, delighting, and educating those customers. Each of you out there is facing the same short challenges, and you'll all be graded on the same highly altered curve, ultimately. So nobody really has, sort of the secret to which way this will end. And when executing at scale, if we do it right, I think we have a chance to actually grab the customer for life. So your challenge is deciding on how the actions you take for your customers over the next few weeks and months position you and them for the long term. I urge you as executives of the insurance industry and as people to rise to that challenge. So over to you, and I wish you luck, and just let you know that Celent is here to help you as you navigate your fresh new technology agenda. So thank you very much, and we'll now end the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for that. So I think it's really interesting. So when you talk about executing at scale, that reminds me, so many insurtech startups we've seen in the last few years. So scale is necessary. Have you seen something work without scale? And from those insurtechs you've seen around, I mean, what models have you seen succeed and which haven't?
I think, first of all experimentation has a role to play. It can be good. And going back to what was said in the presentation, it's not necessarily about a failure. It's about testing something and seeing whether the hypothesis works, and then moving on from there. So the often used phrase fail fast is very relevant. I think we're looking at sort of what worked, and you look at it too across the industry when we see sort of examples. And we touched upon this a few years ago as well. Is trying to look for models which sort of deliver value fast, because ultimately we can keep experimenting, but you have to see a return. And I think sort of if we look back, there are some models which are brilliant ideas, really good ideas, but they just haven't taken off. So things like peer-to-peer, it's been patchy where that's been successful. In some places it has, but on the whole, if you look at the number of experiments and the number that are still around today, there's still very, very few, and it's because it's a very hard concept to sell to a client, I think. And likewise with the gadget insurance, again, these are great examples, and you can use lots of digital technology to really sort of make parametric insurance work well. But again, sort of from a volume point of view, for companies which are just built around that one concept, it's a very difficult thing to get any scale of any size and really get some value back. So I think those are examples of things which, brilliant experiments, brilliant uses of technology, but haven't yet gone past the proof model. Where we've seen success, I think, is where you're picking probably quite a dull and boring area of insurance, but we know it's needed. So where good examples are things like, for example, either applying technique to an existing process, like artificial intelligence, whether it's around first notification of loss, or whether it's around propensity modeling, which are quite traditional insurance pieces, but applying new technology to it. There we've seen it work well. Some social models, so bought by many in the UK, has sort of been accelerating very fast, and that's a social selling model. It's not peer-to-peer, it's social selling. And there you've got a model that really does create some true engagement around something that people love, which is their pets. So there I think you can see some great examples. But I think ultimately, so if you're delivering faster cash and faster volume quickly, then those insurtech type examples tend to do are still with us today, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. And when I think about scaling insurtech, immediately I'm thinking Shongan, for example. But it's very mass market products. Small amounts, but it's volume. And I look some of the countries we have in Latin America. They're really big, like Brazil, Mexico. But most of them, they are not. They're small. So it's very difficult to replicate the Shongan model in a very small country. But the other thing we've seen is some of these companies, they have the know-how, and they've converted themselves more into a partner to insurance companies. Right? We've seen that with Slice Labs, for example. But there are many. And the other thing we've seen is that one of the reasons that those technologies are successful is because they think about the ecosystem and building a marketplace. And technologically speaking, you need APIs to do that. And many of the insurance companies are yet with legacy systems where that's difficult to achieve. Does this resonate also with what you see, for example, in the UK?
Very much so, yes. Yeah. And let's be honest.
Sorry, Juan, I don't know if you have the same issue, but we are not able to hear Jamie.
Oh, I do.
Okay.
If he can maybe exit and go backstage because I don't hear him or see him, and some other people having the same issue.
Okay, I do. Jamie, just can we try that? Can you leave the session to backstage and go live again? Thanks.
Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Okay, right. Thank you.
Okay. Slight bug there.
Okay, there you are. Okay, you were saying.
So your question was about API usage. Looks like the video is not great either, but hopefully that doesn't matter. But yeah, it's a great time to be in insurance technology. It's probably the best time since the time that I started. So I can remember when I started, quite a few years ago now. It was an exciting time then because technology was coming in. It was easy to deploy, and you were just moving out the system of record into doing something really interesting, and that was fantastic. And right now, I think we're at that other point now where the technology again is exciting in insurance. So I think if you take the incumbent technology providers, not all of them, but some of them are still quite traditional in their approach towards things. But going back to what you're saying about some of the insurtechs selling their software and moving into the platform space, I think you've got some really exciting examples there, and it is a far more exciting place than it was, say, even just 10 years ago as a result. So definitely, ecosystem APIs are sort of used a lot and talked about a lot. But I think if company is selecting a new system now, that's certainly going to be one of the checkboxes on the RFP or the RFI is to actually look at capability to open up the services to external providers to be able to do that.
Yes, no, indeed. And many of the companies that are attending the conference are insurance companies. Yeah. And so they are those big ships. Some are bigger than others, but they're those big ships. Now, gaining some of the attributes, the characteristics of the insurtech startups, like agility, speed. We see that the insurance companies always look more for perfection other than speed. So the concept of minimum viable product for some companies is not acceptable at all. So how have you seen insurance companies actually, going from being so traditional in their cultures to being able to embrace it?
Every crisis has a silver lining, right? So if you look at the pandemic today, how many decisions have been made really rapidly in your company? And ask yourself that question, because I think insurance companies have shown that they can move fast if they really need to right now. I've just seen some brilliant examples of very fast technology adoption, very fast changes to processes just in the last 4 to 8 weeks, really. So quite often we have to ask ourselves, are we our own worst enemy in some of these? Because the reality is that the industry has proved it can move fast if it needs to. So one would hope that we'll come out of this with a fresh energy to say, well, actually, we've proved that we can do things fast when we have to. We know that we're going to have to do more around operational resilience and digital acceleration anyway. So let's get on with it. Let's get moving. So yeah, hopefully this is a bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah. So well, Jamie, thank you very much. We're almost finished now. I'll pass the baton to Gabriela so she can tell us what is next.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's only one question here. Just coming in. What about execution of the virtual flow? It is part of the new interaction.
What do you mean by virtual close?
Is Juan Medina asking.
Juan, can you provide a little bit of context?
I believe the virtual close, he means that we are all in our houses working remotely with no personal contact. And how about this new reality? I'm guessing.
No. Close a business.
Close a business case.
Sorry, what was the question, Juan?
I'm trying to understand. But do you mean, Juan Medina? Do you mean like how do you actually do business?
New business. Yeah, I mean, if it is the new business side, I think that is one of the challenges that we're all going to be facing. Is there are some parts of our business model which depends on trust and creating that personal relationship. There are other parts which it simply isn't. So, sort of mandated motor insurance, which is true in many countries around the world. Those lend themselves to digital processes, but those which are sort of require an element of trust. Building the pipeline for new sales is somewhat still a conundrum, I think, with many people. I mean, we see it in all businesses. We see it in our own business. We see it in our clients' businesses. Sort of when you talk about business flows and how things are going today, if you're talking existing customers, it's easier to hold on to them. It's easier to engage them. When it talks about finding new customers in the current climate, especially where trust is required, there's still some things to try out there. I think nobody's got the perfect example when we are physically locked in our homes, but I think technology has to help us. I mean, Zoom use. So my own personal sort of pensions advisor, first time he ever used Zoom was in the last 5 weeks, so it's quite interesting to chat to him on it and see him make the same mistakes that we make every day on Zoom. But yeah, there's lots of.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it right ourselves. Our business model hasn't changed. The way we interact hasn't changed. Some of us have started using more the video camera than before, but there was a lot of business being done like that. But it's true that in Latin America, that element of trust is first built getting to know someone, and that is more on a person-to-person basis. And I think that after the pandemic, while we will keep many of the good things that we learned from now, we will go back to many of the things we used to do. That's for sure. Now, in the meanwhile, projects haven't stopped, so we have to work virtually through video conference. There is much more discipline in working. Everybody's saying that, and that's a good outcome. So we've seen it, for example, in selection processes. And the other thing is that contracts are being signed no matter what. We signed a big one in the middle of the pandemic on a Friday, and we are looking to sign some big projects also near soon. So similar to what Juan Medina does. He works on a software vendor house. Of course, that some companies are holding on some of the decisions to understand a little bit better what's going to be the impact. So the pipeline may move a little bit more into the last quarters of the year, but maybe Juan Medina wants to say something. Gaby, can you open his microphone, please?
Yes, he's also saying that we need to develop a virtual rapport, some steps to close a business without the face-to-face. He's raising his hand, so I'm going to let him in, so we can have. Juan, si puedes darle al OK, vas a la pantalla junto con Jamie y con Juan.
Yes. Are you hearing me?
Juan.
Hi. Yes, I was trying to explain that my point was that other than telecommunications, bandwidth, monitoring process. So in the past, there was people closing the business on a restaurant. Okay, in the past. Right now, we are closing business face to face. But right now, depending what is happening in the next month, we need to develop a real virtual rapport in order to gain the confidence, the trustness, okay? to close a business, because it's not simple to do it right now, okay? Because most of the people are thinking, to know the guy, see the face, okay, the body communication, that kind of things. So we need to develop some kind of virtual rapport in order to gain the trust. That was my point.
But also, you know what, Juan, that I've seen is that people have adapted. So that doesn't mean that once the pandemic is over, that adaptation will stay, because a lot of things we're doing is because we know that we are in exceptional times. So having a conference like this, we would all like to be at the Fort Lauderdale Hotel with the pantries and the ocean, and being able to mingle, in person. And you know that in this conference, when we run it every year, there is people that also come with their families, and we get to know them not just a professional, but as an individual. And I think we'll go back to that. But in the meantime, despite we are like that we like, our face to face, we need to continue doing business, and people is adapting. And I think that the insurance industry has demonstrated in Latin America that they've adapted really, really, really well, in my opinion. Okay, so if I may, there are some few more questions that
there are a few more questions. I don't know, Juan, if you want to go with Gabriel Moraes' questions. And there's one question from Fabian.
Fabian was first.
Yes.
Okay, so...
Thank you, Juan Medina. I take you out of stage, so...
Thank you.
Fabian, I think you're right, and we're already seeing that. We're seeing insurance companies that have, for example, returned the leases, the rentals of some offices, because they know they won't be able to use them. They've automated some of their processes because of need. They've also discovered that there are departments that are more productive working from home than working in their offices. And this, I've been told by several CEOs of insurance companies and of related companies. I think that the reduction of the headcount at the end of the day is going to vary company by company, because I've also spoken to CEOs of insurance companies where they are putting employees first, and they'll do their best to try to even find some other work for them to do other than let them go, particularly during the pandemic. But I think that the reduction of headcount is not something that we realize now. I mean, every time we discuss technology and automation and digitization, there is an implication of, is there going to be a headcount reduction? And some companies decide to go that way, and others they don't. But Jamie, I don't know what's your view on the topic.
My view is. Sadly, I think come 2021 we will see some reductions. I don't think they'll be immediate, but I think we're learning different ways of working. We'll go back to, and I already know of some of our clients who are going back to almost like a zero-based budgeting approach for next year, because we know that business volumes are going to be down. We know that there are some areas of the business that are just not performing in the current position. And have already made the decision that they're going to take a zero-based budgeting approach towards building their budget for next year. So I think things are going to get tough in some places around the world. But like you said, there are also some quite phenomenal examples of leadership around people that we're seeing, around sort of securing jobs, around sort of caring for individuals, providing them the space to do that. And I think it has brought out the humanity of industries, and also raise some quite questions. As firms, what are we here to do as well? Are we here purely to make profit? Now, obviously, that's a key thing, but we're also sort of containers of related people who have a shared purpose and shared norm. And so it's going to be difficult, though. I do think it's going to be difficult. But what you were saying about sort of reducing property sizes, I also was speaking to a client recently, and And they were also planning and said, well, actually, we might need to increase our property portfolio for the near term, because if we have to implement social distancing rules within the office, and we do want to take people back into the office, then we don't have enough space. And they're starting to think about that. So whereas some people are saying we're getting rid of our property portfolio, we're going to try and get different models, other people are saying, well, actually, we're still a human business and we still need to employ people, where there are some areas where we may actually have to increase our footprint. So I think that's still an outlier. I don't think that's the norm, but it is interesting to see how people are thinking through what they're going to have to do.
Thanks. So I think there's another question from Gabriel Moraes. So how can a big company deliver a digital solution to our customers in a couple of months when we take years trying to do it before this COVID situation? Yeah. What I've seen from COVID is not a massive change of your underlying, you would say, solution infrastructure. It has been more targeted to problems that you found in your processes. You couldn't operate. So, for example, how do you underwrite a policy that needs inspection if you cannot inspect the asset? So remote inspection, for example, or how do you adjust claims if you are with a shelter-in-place order, but there has been a claim? So or how do you sign a contract if we don't have digital signature technology? So it has been more around those aspects. But having said that, I've also seen acceleration of certain projects that were like in the back burner, parked, because there were eternal discussions about, should we do this? What are the agents going to say? What is the market going to react? Whatever it was the reason. And now companies are more pragmatic because it's a question of survival. So I've seen companies launch the possibility of quote and buy an insurance policy online, while before they didn't have that. But again, they didn't change their core system. What they did was work with companies that could give them that speed and agility to deploy. Many of the companies that have been activated to do these things are insurtechs, because usually insurtechs take a specific problem and they give a very unique solution to that. And they're specialized there, and they are agile. They're small. They have it in their DNA. They are fast. So we've seen a lot of uptake in contracts to these startups to solve these specific problems. I think that in the midterm and in the long term, we're going to see some companies rethinking their digital transformation and accelerating some of the things that they didn't do, but which are more into the core of their solution infrastructure. Jamie, what do you think?
I think that's very true, but I'd also go back to encouraging people just to reflect on their behaviors over the last 4 to 8 weeks, and just say, if you could make decisions that quickly in the last 4 to 8 weeks about your business, why can't you make them in the next 4 to 8 weeks or the next year? So it's always a case of, is there anything we can do to keep checking ourselves to make sure we're not slipping back into cautious behaviors on some of these things, because there's lots of opportunity out there, and quite often, accelerating the digital front end side of things is not it's not that hard technically. It's often harder from a winning hearts and minds internally point of view. But if there's anything you can pick up from the lessons learned in the last few weeks and apply that to the future business, I think that should be good for everyone, including customers, the most important people in that equation.
Yes, but I also think that implicit in the question is the legacy infrastructure and the legacy systems that they may have that difficult to do that transformation, which is you can decide fast, but you cannot execute fast.
So
because it takes more time.
And there we've seen clients successfully speed up their execution through finding alternate routes to achieve the same thing. So I think, again, yeah, sort of there's a neat side to our brain as an industry that we want everything to be perfect and everything to be strategic. The reality is very different. And if we were honest with ourselves and looked at our estates, we'd probably also say, well, actually, even though we think it's neat and it looks neat on the PowerPoint, in reality, it's not. So I think there are far solutions which this is almost this is almost heresy. What I'm saying there is far solution to get to market sometimes by accepting that what you have is not fit for purpose and working around it. But as I said, that heresy in the enterprise architecture world and what have you, we've been pushing for so long around simplification of the estate. Still important, don't get me wrong, but I think there are new technologies, ways of doing things which are faster than the old ways. Speed of adoption.
Thank you, Jamie. And I think we need to close. Gabriel, let's catch up because I think we may be able to help you understand what can be done and on that aspect. There's a point made by Geraldine, which I think we all agree. Regulation and legal matters need to accompany anything you want to do. I think that fortunately, in this survival mode, everybody's trying to do their best to try to accommodate things. But in the midterm, long-term view, it would be good to have the regulator much more involved in this digitization.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, again, thank you very much, everybody. Gabriela, ¿cómo seguimos?
Thank you, Jamie, so much for your time and your sharing. Thank you, Juan. So, los invito a todos a que nos reunamos ahora en la zona del lunch. Ahí podemos tener un café virtual, sentarnos en distintas mesas para discutir y también es un momento ideal para ir a visitar a los sponsors que están en la zona de booth. Tanto FICO como Equisoft, como Guidewire, como Celent, están ahí sus equipos para darles información y hacer un poco más de networking. Thank you. Nos vemos entonces en 30 minutos, por favor, en la siguiente sala, Ejecutando a Escala. Nuevos clientes. Nuevos clientes, nuevas soluciones, mismos problemas. Con Eduardo Venancio. Ahora nos vemos. Muchas gracias.
Hasta luego.